Hopefully we each have the goal to become a Zion person and one day build a Zion society. But how many times in the history of the world has a Zion society been established? Not very many. But today we get to study about the life and the city of Enoch, the premier example of a Zion society. Welcome to Face Towards Zion. The Come Follow Me lesson for January 24th through the 30th is Moses 7. The Lord called his people Zion. The picture shown here is by Josh Cotton and can be found on the Josh Cotton blog. It is his interpretation of the raising up of the city of Enoch. The idea is of raising the city, buildings and all. If you look close, there is a river running through the city, so as the city rises, the water spills off the sides in waterfalls. I've heard of legends where if you place all the continents together like a map, they will all fit to form one landmass. However, where the Gulf of Mexico is, there is still a big hole, and that is because that is where the city of Enoch was that was raised up. Now, as I said, that is a legend. It may be cool to ponder on, but my vision of the raising of the city is not a physical raising, but a spiritual raising. When you die, you don't get to take your house with you. You move on to a different order. And today we are going to talk about different orders, and they are not physical orders. The book of Genesis can easily be divided into two distinct parts. Genesis 1 through 11, which is God's relationship with the world, and Genesis 12 through 50, which is God's relationship established through Abraham and his family. One thing I have learned as I have studied the Bible is it wasn't written haphazardly and as an accident. The scriptures are generally well thought out, and there is a meaning and a structure to them. This structure can be seen in the names of the patriarchs. Now, please know that the translation of any language into another is not precise. There are some words that exist in one language and not in another. Some languages have a word that means something, but those ideas can be expressed using 3 or 4 different words in the other language. Take, for example, a phrase from another language and put it into Google Translate. The computer program will translate it literally, word for word. Often the result is a sentence that doesn't even make sense. So translators will look at the thoughts and the ideas of the original language. That is why things can be translated so differently. That is one reason there are hundreds of translations of the Bible. Words mean different things to different people. The Old Testament, or the Hebrew Bible if you may, was originally written in Hebrew, and Hebrew names had meanings. Take, for example, the name of Adam. Adam translates to mankind, or man, or some would translate it as son of the red earth, or even to be of red, or even of the earth, or even to begin or to produce. So you can see that it is not a literal translation. Adam generally translates to mankind. Seth generally means appointed. Shown are the meanings to the first 10 patriarchs: Adam, Seth, Enos, Canaan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, and Noah. If you take their names, they can create a sentence which says, mankind appointed mortal sorrow. The blessed God shall come down, teaching. His death shall bring the despairing rest or comfort. Now you can see how structured and ordered God is. Also shown is a general timeline of the 20 patriarchs from Adam down to Abraham. You can Google Bible Patriarchs timeline and look at the images and get multiple similar examples. I like to look at the timeline and ponder it. The early fathers lived a long time. Then, at about the time of the flood, their lives decreased with almost each generation. A lot of people have speculated whether they really did live that long. It's interesting to ponder, but I haven't lost any sleep over it. What I do find interesting is that they would live to see like 8 generations. Today, a picture of 4 generations is relatively common and 5 is rare. However, they often had 8. That's pretty interesting. Also look at Shem. He lived to be 600 years old, seeing 10 generations. Some have said that Shem was Melchizedek, while others said that there were too many generations between Shem and Abraham, and we know that Abraham met with Melchizedek. However, a quick look at this chart shows that it would be possible for Shem and Abraham to meet. Last week's Come Follow Me lesson discussed the story of Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel. Chapter 5 of Genesis begins listing the book of the generations of Adam. By the time they get to verse 18, they get to Enoch. Verses 21 through 24 of Genesis says, And Enoch lived 60 and 5 years and begat Methuselah. And Enoch walked with God after he begat Methuselah 300 years and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Enoch were 365 years. And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. And that is the extent that the Old Testament covers Enoch, 4 verses. The New Testament will mention Enoch in Jude and Hebrews 11, but that is it. Just 4 verses in the Old Testament. It's interesting that his life is so much shorter than his ancestors and descendants, but verse 24 catches your attention. And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Interestingly, there are only 2 people in the scriptures that walked with God, Noah and Enoch. Genesis 6 and 9 says, "These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations, and Noah walked with God." Now, the scriptures talk a lot about walking with God and walking before God, but only Enoch and Noah walked with God. It is interesting that Enoch is mentioned in the New Testament, in the book of Jude and Hebrews chapter 11. The fact that this information is mentioned seems to imply that while the Old Testament records are pretty short for Enoch, there were possibly still other records, or at least other stories, that perpetuated throughout all those years. There are legends about the book of Enoch. In fact, today you can go to a bookstore and buy the book of Enoch. But what is that all about? There are really 3 apocryphal books of Enoch. Actually, they are more pseudepigraphal books than they are apocryphal. What is the difference? Pseudepigraphal books are books that someone wrote using someone else's name in order to gain credibility. Apocrypha are books that were originally included into the Greek Septuagint. Technically, some of the Apocrypha are pseudepigrapha, but since they were included into the Septuagint, they kind of get a pass. So these 3 books are generally referred to as 1st Enoch, 2nd Enoch, and 3rd Enoch, but that doesn't mean they are part of the same book or storyline. Generally, when you talk about the book of Enoch, you're referring to 1st Enoch. During the Hellenistic period, which is between the 3rd century BC to the 3rd century AD, numerous works about Enoch were written. Generally, they were written by fringe Jewish or Christian groups. The book of Enoch was apparently known during biblical times, as it seemed to be quoted in the book of Jude. However, the book was lost after the 5th century AD. The book resurfaced at the beginning of the 17th century when it was discovered in Ethiopia, written in the Ethiopic language. This book was pretty obscure until the earliest 20th century, when it was translated and published in English. This book is generally referred to as 1st Enoch. Among the Dead Sea Scrolls was also some writings about Enoch, which support some of the writings of 1st Enoch. The 2nd book of Enoch is known as the Slavonic Enoch, or Secrets of Enoch. These come from a 14th to 16th century AD Bulgarian collections. These did not come out of obscurity until the early to mid 20th century. 3rd Enoch is known as the Book of the Palaces, the Book of Rabbi Ishmael, the High Priest, or the Revelation of Metatron. Though it was seemed to be written in the 2nd century AD, it was attributed to Rabbi Ishmael. These books are interesting and talk about the Nephilim, the Watchers, etc. of Genesis chapter 6, but I'd concentrate on the book of Moses and what Joseph Smith had to say about Enoch. There was quite a bit there. It is after Genesis 5 and 21 that we quoted earlier that Joseph Smith now gives a long addition into the Joseph Smith translation. From Genesis 5:21, Moses 6 verse 26 through 68 is added, as well as the entire chapter of 7th chapter of Moses. This edition begins with this is Moses 6:26. And it came to pass that Enoch journeyed in the land among the people, and as he journeyed, the Spirit of God descended out of heaven and abode upon him. And he heard a voice from heaven saying, Enoch, my son, prophesy unto this people, and say unto them, Repent, for thus saith the Lord, I am angry with this people, and my fierce anger is kindled against them. For their hearts have waxed hard, and their ears are dull of hearing, and their eyes cannot see afar off. We then read of Enoch's call. Enoch is hesitant, as he says he is but a lad. He would have been at least 65 years old, and the people hated him. He reacts much as Moses and Isaiah and even Joseph Smith reacted to their calls. We pick up the story in verse 32. And the Lord said unto Enoch, Go forth and do as I have commanded thee, and no man shall pierce thee. Open thy mouth, and it shall be filled, and I will give thee utterance, for all flesh is in my hands, and I will do as seemeth me good. Say unto this people, Choose you this day to serve the Lord God who made you. Behold, my spirit is upon you, wherefore all thy words will I justify, and the mountains shall flee before you, and the rivers shall turn from their course, and thou shalt abide in me, and I in you. Therefore, walk with me. There's some really interesting material in these verses. First off, it says, No man shall pierce thee. What is this all about? Have you ever looked closely at the exterior of the Salt Lake Temple? You know there is the all-seeing eye. This represents that God can see everything. There is not anything that God does not know. Have you ever been with someone and it seems they can see right through you? Like they know all you have ever done and all that you are? Well, God knows. And Enoch is promised that no man shall pierce him. No one will be able to see through him and claim that he has ulterior motives. People will know who he is and what he stands for, that he has the power of God with him, and this is what happens. The choose you this day verse sounds a lot like Joshua. Perhaps Joshua got that phrase from Enoch. And Enoch is told that the mountains shall flee before him, and the rivers shall turn from their course. Often in scriptures we are told that if we have the faith of a mustard seed, we can say unto this mountain, Remove hence to yonder place, and it shall remove, and nothing shall be impossible unto you. That is in Matthew 17, and this concept is told in other verses as well. Often today we take this as figurative and say that each of us have our own mountains that we have to move, and this is okay, especially if it helps you. But in scripture, are there any times when a prophet did actually move a mountain? Can you think of any? There are actually only two. Enoch does it. See Moses 7:13. And so great was the faith of Enoch that he led the people of God, and their enemies came to battle against them. And he spake the word of the Lord, and the earth trembled, and the mountains fled, even according to his command, and the rivers of water were turned out of their course, and the roar of the lions was heard out of the wilderness. And all nations feared greatly, so powerful was the word of Enoch, and so great was the power of the language which God had given him. And there is also a vague reference to moving a mountain in the book of Ether. Moroni is teaching about faith and the power of faith. He gives a number of examples and then just matter-of-factly says, For the brother of Jared said unto the mountain Zerin, Remove, and it was removed. And if he had not had faith, it would not have moved. Apparently Moroni had access to writings that we don't have. Wouldn't you like to know that whole story? But as neat as these stories are, this power was not reserved for them alone. This power will come into play again in the last days. Keep this story in mind, and I will come back to it at the end of the lesson. Now, I'd really like to go verse by verse through the 6th and 7th chapter of Moses, but we won't have time, so I'm going to have to pick the highlights. First, I want to talk about the covenants that God made with Enoch. 1 Nephi 13, verse 26 says, And after they go forth by the hand of the 12 apostles of the Lamb from the Jews unto the Gentiles, thou seest the formation of that great and abominable church, which is most abominable above all other churches. For behold, they have taken away from the gospel of the Lamb many parts which are plain and most precious, and also many covenants of the Lord have they taken away. Basically, it's saying that as the Bible went forth, the great and abominable church removed many of the covenants that are in the Old Testament. Originally, God made a covenant with Adam, the Adamic covenant. God also made covenants with Enoch, Noah, Abraham, and David. He also made covenants with Lehi and I believe Joseph Smith. We often focus on the Abrahamic covenant. That is covered in the second part of the book of Genesis, chapters 12 through 50. Now, the Abrahamic covenant brings many blessings and responsibilities to us today. In no way do I want to downplay the Abrahamic covenant. Blessings come to us today as we are part of this covenant. But ultimately, my salvation will be tied to the covenants that I make with the Lord and how I keep them. As the Abrahamic covenant plays into my individual covenants, so will the covenant God made with Enoch play into Zion as we build it. And so it is very important to understand the Enochian Covenant. Let's pick up in Moses chapter 7, verse 18. And the Lord called his people Zion, because they were of one heart and one mind, and dwelt in righteousness, and there was no poor among them. And Enoch continued his preaching in righteousness unto the people of God. And it came to pass in his days that he built a city that was called the City of Holiness, even Zion. And it came to pass that the Lord showed unto Enoch all the inhabitants of the earth. And he beheld, and lo, Zion in the process of time was taken up into heaven. And the Lord said unto Enoch, Behold, mine abode forever. To summarize the story in chapter 7, it goes something like this. Rejection of the gospel message. Enoch sees the coming of Jesus in the meridian of time. The earth laments the wickedness. Enoch treats the Lord for divine intervention. To destroy the wickedness, there was a flood. Posterity of Noah returned to wickedness. Enoch sees all of this in vision and wants to be part of God's great work. Let's pick up in Moses chapter 7, verse 50 and 51. And it came to pass that Enoch continued his cry unto the Lord, saying, I ask thee, O Lord, in the name of thine only begotten, even Jesus Christ, that thou wilt have mercy upon Noah and his seed, that the earth might never more be covered by the floods. And the Lord could not withhold, and he covenanted with Enoch. And he sware unto him with an oath that he would stay the floods, that he would call upon the children of Noah. And he sent forth an unalterable decree that a remnant of his seed should always be found among all nations, while the earth should stand. So this unalterable decree is that Noah's seed will always be upon the earth, or that the Lord will never again kill everyone like he did at the time of the flood. This is further explained in Moses chapter 8, verse 2. And it came to pass that Methuselah, the son of Enoch, was not taken, that the covenants of the Lord might be fulfilled, which he made unto Enoch, for he truly covenanted with Enoch, that Noah should be of the fruit of his loins. As Enoch saw the events of the earth groaned. Enoch was pretty insistent in asking the Lord when the earth would rest. The Lord explained, starting in verse 61. And the day shall come that the earth shall rest. But before that day the heavens shall be darkened, and a veil of darkness shall cover the earth. And the heavens shall shake, and also the earth, and great tribulation shall be among the children of men. But my people will I preserve. And righteousness will I send down out of heaven, and truth will I send forth out of the earth, to bear testimony of mine only begotten. His resurrection from the dead, yea, and also the resurrection of all men. And righteousness and truth will I cause to sweep the earth as with the flood, to gather out mine elect from the four quarters of the earth, unto a place which I shall prepare, an holy city, that my people may gird up their loins, and be looking forth for the time of my coming. For there shall be my tabernacle, and it shall be called Zion, a new Jerusalem. And the Lord said unto Enoch, Then shalt thou and all thy city meet them there, and we will receive them into our bosom, and they shall see us, and we will fall upon their necks, and they shall fall upon our necks, and we will kiss each other. So the Enochian covenant is that God's city was taken up into heaven. Then in the last days, as Zion is created here on earth and our society falls apart, that the city of Enoch will come down and rescue the New Jerusalem here on the earth. As Enoch made this covenant with God, the Lord set the rainbow as a token of the covenant. As the rainbow rises to heaven, then it falls back to earth. This token is talked about in the Joseph Smith translation of Genesis chapter 9. That chapter is actually talking about Noah, but the Lord just references this token as a passing comment. It says, And the bow shall be in the cloud, and I will look upon it, that I may remember the everlasting covenant which I made unto thy father Enoch, that, when men should keep all my commandments, Zion should again come upon the earth, the city of Enoch which I have caught up unto myself. And this is mine everlasting covenant, that when thy posterity shall embrace the truth and look upward, then shall Zion look downward, and all the heavens shall shake with gladness, and the earth shall tremble with joy. And the general assembly of the church of the firstborn shall come down out of heaven and possess the earth, and shall have place until the end come. And this is mine everlasting covenant which I made with thy father Enoch. And the bow shall be in the cloud, and I will establish my covenant unto thee, which I have made between me and thee for every living creature of all flesh that shall be upon the earth. And God said unto Noah, This is the token of the covenant which I have established between me and thee, for all flesh that shall be upon the earth. So the rainbow is a token that the Lord first made with Enoch and then renewed with Noah, that the inhabitants of the earth would be saved. Satan is a master of taking things that are holy and denigrating them. Today, the symbol of the rainbow has taken a completely different meaning. It is really a symbol of God's love and eternal love. As the covenant God made with Abraham brings us blessings today, so shall the covenant that God made with Enoch. This covenant shall be the power that we use to build Zion. In fact, this power will be gained by virtue of the priesthood through the Enoch covenant. It may seem that I'm jumping around a little bit in scriptures, but the story of Enoch is just not in one place. It is spread out a little bit here and a little bit there. Much of what we have restored through Joseph Smith is in the Joseph Smith translation. Let's jump ahead one more time to Genesis chapter 14. Here Melchizedek is the great high priest and blesses Abram. Joseph Smith translation, chapter 14. Now Melchizedek was a man of faith who wrought righteousness, and when a child he feared God, and stopped the mouths of lions, and quenched the violence of fire. And thus having been approved of God, he was ordained and high priest after the order of the covenant which God made with Enoch, it being after the order of the Son of God, which order came not by man, nor the will of man, neither by father nor mother, neither by the beginning of days nor end of years, but of God. And it was delivered unto men by the calling of his own voice, according to his own will, unto as many as believed on his name. For God, having sworn unto Enoch, and unto his seed with an oath by himself, that every one being ordained after this order and calling should have power, by faith, to break mountains, to divide the seas, to dry up waters, to turn them out of their course, to put at defiance the armies of the nations, to divide the earth, to break every band, to stand in the presence of God, to do all things according to his will, according to his command, subdue principalities and powers, and this by the will of the Son of God, which was from before the foundation of the world. And men having this faith, coming up unto this order of God, were translated and taken up into heaven. And now Melchizedek was a priest of this order, therefore he obtained peace in Salem, and was called the Prince of Peace. One more verse, and then we will unpack it. This is in the Doctrine and Covenants, section 76. Remember this section. It's the vision or the vision of the 3 degrees of glory. Now, beginning in verse 56. They are they who are priests and kings, who have received of his fullness and his glory, and are priests of the Most High, after the order of Melchizedek, which was after the order of Enoch, which was after the order of the only begotten Son. Do you notice the words I highlighted in these verses? The order of the covenant which God made with Enoch, the order of Melchizedek, which is after the order of Enoch, which is after the order of the only begotten Son. What are these orders that these verses are talking about? When the word order is used as a noun, it means a group of people united in a formal way. For an example, take the 5th book in the Harry Potter series. It is titled Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. Basically, this order was a formal organization that was founded by Albus Dumbledore to fight Lord Voldemort and his followers. To join the order, you had to agree to certain conditions, and they had a unified purpose. So to be in an order, you have to meet certain requirements or be dedicated to certain causes. There are royal orders, military orders, religious orders, and more. Usually, to be accepted into a royal order, you have to be born of a certain lineage. To be in a military order, you have to perform a chivalrous deed, such as to be a knight, and then you often had to agree to certain conditions to be in an order like the Order of the Knights Templar, or the Knights Hospitaller, or others. To join the religious order of Melchizedek in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, you have to be a member in good standings, a male of at least the age 18 or higher, meet certain worthiness criteria, and be willing to make certain commitments. You can then be formally ordained to the oath and covenant of the priesthood and can then perform certain ordinances. You are then a member of the Order of Melchizedek. As you grow in spirituality and understand the Lord's will, you can then call on his name to receive certain blessings. You may have to formally invoke these privileges, such as give a blessing, and you can perform certain work. Now remember, this order is after the Order of Enoch, which is after the Order of the Son of God. It seems the Order of Enoch enables you to do certain things. Among them are: have the power by faith to break mountains, to divide the seas, to dry up waters, to turn them out of their course, to put at defiance the armies of nations, to divide the earth, to break every band, to stand in the presence of God, to do all things according to his will, according to his command, subdue principalities and powers, translated and taken up into heaven. We can ask, what is the difference between the Melchizedek priesthood and the Enoch priesthood? Well, first off, did the Melchizedek priesthood exist before the man named Melchizedek was born? Section 107 teaches us that before Melchizedek's day, it was called the Holy Priesthood after the order of the Son of God. But out of respect or reverence to the name of the Supreme Being, they called that priesthood after Melchizedek, or the Melchizedek priesthood. Joseph Smith was once asked the question, was the priesthood of Melchizedek taken away when Moses died? In the teachings of the prophet Joseph Smith is his answer. Joseph said, all priesthood is Melchizedek, but there are different portions or degrees of it. That portion which brought Moses to speak with God face to face was taken away, but that which brought the ministry of the angels remained. So the Melchizedek priesthood seems to encompass all powers, but different portions or degrees of it can be reserved to not be executed at certain times. It seems that the Order of Enoch had the power of translation. The Order of the Son of God seems to have had the power of resurrection. These powers are on the earth today, but are not actively used. The key is they will be used when the time is right and through the power of the one who holds the appropriate keys, which is the senior apostle on the earth at the time. If we were righteous enough and there was a need for it, the Order of Enoch allows you to move mountains and defy the armies of all nations, to subdue principalities and powers. Do you think those powers will come in handy as we get closer and closer to the Lord's second coming? Do you think it's important to understand these powers and to be righteous enough to use them when the time is right? Do you see how the priesthood after the Order of Enoch, which is from the covenant of Enoch, pertains to us today? See how this covenant is important to us as well as the Abrahamic covenant. To accomplish all of this, we have to learn about and become Zion people. Where do we learn about Zion? These chapters are some of the very best place to learn about this. Moses chapter 7. And the Lord called his people Zion because they were of one heart and one mind and dwelt in righteousness, and there was no poor among them. In order to be a Zion person, we have to be of one heart and of one mind with the Lord and with the other members of Zion. We must dwell in righteousness, and there is to be no poor among us. How are we doing? Let's back up a little. What is Zion? Doctrine and Covenants section 97 verse 21 says, therefore, verily thus saith the Lord, let Zion rejoice, for this is Zion, the pure in heart. Therefore, let Zion rejoice, while all the wicked shall mourn. So Zion is not only will be a city or a place or a society, Zion is also a state of being. Only as we become a Zion person will we be able to build a Zion society and the city. As one author said, to be a participant in Zion is to become pure, to be endowed with the fullest priesthood power, to rise above the mortal sphere, to be endowed with power that transcends life and death, to have authority in heaven and on earth, and to quite literally dwell with God. Really, the question for each of us today is, what do I do as just a common member of the church? What do I do today to try to reach this goal? First, I would say that by myself, I won't be able to build Zion all by myself. I can't make it, so there are no poor among us. But what can I do? I need to become a Zion person myself. Do I dwell in righteousness? What can I do to improve that? And that is a pretty personal question. The answer is probably different for each of us. What I can do is ponder this question for myself and take it to the Lord. He will then tell me what I need to do. I think the words of our current prophet are very instructive. President Nelson said, "Anytime you do anything that helps anyone on either side of the veil, take a step towards making covenants with God and receiving their essential baptismal and temple ordinances, you are helping to gather Israel." It is as simple as that. I think that is the key. Small, consistent steps to help you dwell in righteousness. That is what you can do to become a Zion person. Pray for it and follow the inspiration that you receive. So I guess I would like to conclude with what blessings can be ours today, not only from the Abrahamic covenant, but also the Enochian covenant. There will come a day when the blessings of the Order of Enoch will become necessary for our very survival. I would like to close with a selection from the 84th section of the Doctrine and Covenants. It's kind of long, but I think it summarizes things very well. Last slide I discussed what can we do, and it is to take the gospel to the world, but not all the world will accept us. Nevertheless, search diligently and spare not, and woe unto that house or that village or city that rejecteth you, or your words or your testimony concerning me. Woe, I say again, unto that house or that village or city that rejecteth you, or your words or your testimony of me. For I, the Almighty, have laid my hands upon the nations to scourge them for their wickedness. And plagues shall go forth, and they shall not be taken from the earth until I have completed my work, which shall be cut short in righteousness, until all shall know me, who remain, even from the least unto the greatest, and shall be filled with the knowledge of the Lord, and shall see eye to eye, and shall lift up their voice, and with the voice together sing this new song, saying, Now, what follows is a new song. In Alma chapter 5, Alma asks if we can sing the song of redeeming love. What follows is a song of redeeming love. It says, "The Lord hath brought again Zion." This is the Zion we've been talking about. "The Lord hath redeemed his people Israel." This is the remnant of the Jews and also the remnants of the house of Israel, according to the election of grace, which was brought to pass by the faith and covenant of their fathers. There's that covenant of their fathers, not just of Abraham, but the covenant of Enoch and the fathers. "The Lord hath redeemed his people, and Satan is bound and time is no longer. The Lord hath gathered all things in one. The Lord hath brought down Zion from above. The Lord hath brought up Zion from beneath." There's that Zion coming down, the city of Enoch coming down from heaven, the city of the New Jerusalem being raised up like the rainbow. "The earth hath travailed and brought forth her strength. The truth is established in her bowels," that is, in the bowels of mercy. "And the heavens have smiled upon her, and she is clothed with the glory of her God, for he stands in the midst of his people." So we have a city that the Lord stands in the midst of his people. Now is a praise, a song of praise. Remember in Isaiah chapter 6, where Isaiah receives his call and the people are singing this song and he doesn't know the words. They are, "Glory and honor and power and might be ascribed to our God, for he is full of mercy. Justice, grace, and truth, and peace, forever and ever. Amen."